Yesterday. We used to call it tomorrow, remember?
Television,
Satellites, waveguides, lasers,
gasoline from CSAS,
fiber optics,
rubies from
Technology
Peach
that
Pit,
enables cars to drive themselves.
picture phones someday. Maybe even in color.
plants grown without soil.
Fusion reactors that produce limitless energy.
Oh, what an exciting world. Every kind of progress has a beginning, a starting point. And then someone has to move ahead and take the step that might make tomorrow better.
We have no idea who's going to solve cancer. We don't know who's going to fix the energy crisis. We don't know who's going to clean water. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know who's going to like do extraterrestrial travel.
And we can't start off by cutting out most people from having access to be able to even step up.
Because at the end of the day, what you get is you get subpar solutions because you haven't picked a big enough sample to actually draw really great ideas from.
Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Tomorrow Talks. I'm Joe Gonzalez, an industrial designer at Tomorrow Lab. And due to the momentum that we've seen around the Black Lives Matter movement, we thought it would be a great time to talk about the issue of diversity in design. So with me today, I have Keith Kirkland, who is the co-founder and head of haptics, awesome title, for Wearworks. Thank you, Keith, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think a great place to start would just be a quick review of where we've come from and our introduction to design / hardware. I know that whole maker scene's kind of blurred together, especially with initial interests, because they don't exactly explain to a sixth grader, well, this is industrial design instead of engineering, instead of something else. Yeah. So yeah, Keith, if you can start us off.
You know, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be, like, I love radios, you know, and so I was always like figuring out, I would look at my Sony radios, and I'm like, wow, why didn't they put this button here? Why didn't they do this? And I thought that, like, I'm gonna be an engineer and like, I'm gonna design electronics. And so I went to school for engineering. I went to Rutgers University in New Brunswick in Jersey. And I did one semester of electrical engineering. I was like, this is not for me. You know, like I ended up switching over to mechanical engineering, which suited me much, much better. So after some time in mechanical engineering, a very short time actually, I kind of worked for about 6 months and decided I didn't want to do this anymore. I left and decided to go to fashion school. And I became a shoemaker and a handbag designer. And so in my mind, my engineering—
Because that is the logical next step.
So I went to school for shoe and handbag design. Handbags were like the love of my life. I loved it. It was amazing. And then about 2 or 3 years into the fashion industry, I'm working at Coach. You know, it's like one of the best jobs I had ever had. And I'm a handbag engineer there. And I start to think like, wow, you know, when you look beyond the seasons, what are we really doing? You know, like, and at the time, fast fashion was like, you know, like kind of like at its height in like 2012. And it was starting to get a lot of backlash from the sustainability community in particular. And also from the fashion design community itself, because fashion designers, it was hard enough to design 4 cycles a year. Like it was crazy amounts of work. And now it's like basically continuous cycles. And so the fashion design industry in itself was kind of going crazy. And so anyway, I decided to leave and explore how I can use design to kind of forward humanity. And I went back to school for the 3rd time and got a master's degree in industrial design at Pratt Institute. And that's kind of where, for me, like that old love of making radios and electronics kind of like brought into my real world with fashion and in the space of wearable technology.
Why is it important, I guess, is what I want to get at, to have diversity in design? Like, what does that mean? Who benefits from that? Like, why is it a thing we should be striving for? And then also, I want to talk about your efforts to improve that.
You know, like I did a residency at TED, and one of the people that I did a residency with was this woman. Her name was Luz Claudia. And Luz was a PhD neuroscientist, you know what I'm saying? And at one point, like she tells her TED Talk, and in her TED Talk around how one of her students basically was like, hey, how come we're not studying the prevalence of asthma in my community? And he was from the Bronx. And she was like, okay, let's take a look at it. And so basically what she found out is that they took their map of like asthma prevalence and it matched the map to the lowest incomes in New York City, which matched the map to where all the people of color live at. And basically like she walked around with these maps and got the city to change, like got asthma clinics and like the zip codes that had the worst asthma rates, because now it's like, it's not just, oh, a thing that might be a genetic thing for people who are Black, or like, it's like, oh, it's like if you live in this zip code that is poor, you will probably have asthma. You know what I'm saying?
And that's where I think there's like a new emphasis on why we need to have these diverse perspectives because of the wave of issues we're going to have as a result of climate change and sustainability. So not only what have we affected so bad that it's affecting our whole environment, but still, what are we just throwing away right now? Those disproportionately affect almost everywhere poor people and people of color. And people who are likely on a large scale poor are people of color or in neighborhoods that are going to be affected. So recently there was another, I think a research group released an updated map for flood lines projected over the next few decades. And basically all the flood lines are much worse than where cities currently have residents be forced to take out flood insurance. And where they are worse, it's largely in poorer communities because people knew it was going to flood, but it's still where you can build a house for cheap. And who's going to buy the cheap house and maybe not have access to, or even not be able to do anything about the research for where it will flood? Poor people and people of color. So as we're walking into more of these issues where design and construction and just engineering, like, these are all problems that are going to get worse quickly. They're going to disproportionately affect us. And we need more people who will be in a position to speak to that. And that's where I want to try to figure out, not obviously here, but like what are steps that we can be taking to just increase those numbers. Like there are small efforts we can do where, yes, Tomorrow Lab helped a class of students be introduced. Hopefully they're inspired to go and continue design and engineering efforts. But I don't know more systematically, how do you handle this large issue of introducing these fields as opportunities for these communities? Like that was the main thing we were trying to do in reaching back. Like maybe someone in our class doesn't go to pursue with design, but they were telling their friend the whole time that they were working on it, hey, I'm doing this really cool project. Industrial design exists, which I feel like for all industrial designers is like someone had to tell you those were the search words, because otherwise you don't find out.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I learned about industrial design in fashion school, like in the second degree, and I was like, wow, if I'd known about this from the beginning. My personal view is like, how do you change the world? You know, like same way you eat an elephant. Like, I mean, one bite at a time, right? I mean, we love elephants. Don't eat elephants, but you know what I'm saying? Like the
other
idea,
large animal that is okay to eat, or maybe not even animal, but this really big plant that we can all feel good about.
I'm actually like mainly vegetarian. Sorry, elephants. But you know, like the big thing is like, you know, like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? You know, like we talk about diversity, it's like, different people and giving different people different skin tones and different genders and different identifications, all equal access to, that's super duper important. But for me, like the real thing is that like you need, like if I started a company with all my friends from Camden, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, like we might be successful, but like everyone would have the same mentality. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't have the same exact mentality, and like you can't. It's like it's kind of like, you know, like it's like I don't know, like monolithic crops, right? You know, like, you know, the same genetic species of corn, like one disease comes through and it's like they're all basically genetic clones, like wipes out the whole field because there's not enough difference between the corn standing next to each other so that this one can get affected but this one doesn't.
Especially in design and technology, where you're not only the few people who get to create solutions for the many, you're also the people who get to decide which problems are worthy of solving.
You know, it's like, why are men designing products for women? Like, doesn't really seem like a great idea. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I get it, kind of like some people see the market, but then like, I know a few founders who are women who are working on like femtech products, and it's like a lot of times like they walk into rooms and because of course it's like mainly like like men, what I'm saying, like they don't even understand like the issue or the problem, especially since like a lot of times like the men are a bit older, so it's like the mentality and like the male female relationships were just very different back in the day, what I'm saying, and so it's like a lot of those ideas, what I'm saying, like like it creates a challenge because like the person that you're going to seek that you want to support you doesn't have a thorough understanding enough of your problem to even recognize how big of a problem it is and how big of an opportunity, more importantly, it is. I mean, partly that's your goal as founder, to deliver that story to everybody, regardless of how different they are from you or how far removed they are from the problem. Like we work with people who are blind, visually impaired in the work that we do now with WearWorks. And, like I didn't know a person who was blind before we started this company. What I'm saying? Like it's, but then I talked to like dozens of people who just would give me hours of their life story and like, how does it work? And, and then, like my co-founder decided that he was going to blindfold himself. And I got so offended because I was like, if you as an Asian person decide to paint yourself black to get the black experience, like that would be a huge, like you might not make it out alive if you went to Camden. What I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
But, what I'm saying? And we got into a big argument about it. And I'm just like, yo, don't do it. He was like, yo, I'm doing it. And I'm like, yo, don't. He's like, we need the
But it's a matter of recognizing that, like,
Exactly.
Don't assume that you can you need to be open to doing the research and talking to people and having the conversation, but don't assume that you can be a stand-in for someone who this is directly affecting. No matter how much research you do, I'm not going to be a black woman for that project, no matter how much I want to have those conversations.
And that's what a part where I think is really valuable is that like you do have to do the research, which I feel like a lot of people sometimes don't do. What I'm saying? Like, but then even with all the research, you are still not a stand-in. What I'm saying? Which is like, like we just hired a guy, Jim, who's like a back-end developer with like 20 plus years of like, like back-end programming experience. And he also happens to be legally blind, and so while Jim is building stuff out and while we're having conversations, is like accessibility is no longer the thing that we do afterwards because that's when we can afford to have someone sit down and look at it in one shot and to say, hey, what's wrong here? And so even though accessibility was like a core functionality of our thing, because none of us dealt with accessibility in a real way, we still had to do it as a hindsight thing after we would do what we thought was accessible. And then we give it to someone and like realize that it wasn't. Like having that firsthand experience of someone who's actually experienced the problem that you're solving, I think is super duper important. And the other thing I feel is really important, or even more important, is that like, like I read a story about these two teenagers, 13 and 14 years old. They built a web browser called Crocodile Light, I believe it was called. And the idea was that Crocodile Light was built as a web browser that was optimized for 2G networks. So like when you go in to it with like a 4G phone and you're trying to use Safari or Chrome, it's like the worst experience ever when you have 2G, So they built a web browser that optimized the 2G experience because that was their problem.
When I went to CES, not this year because it wasn't happening, last year, it was like a dream that I had since middle school. I was reading on CNET about the CES discussions every year for like which phones were going to be announced, what TVs were coming out, what features and design, especially when phones were weird. I was watching every crappy 480p video. And then so to finally go was like, all right, like I'm doing the thing. I'm here. I'm going to be going for a company that I work for. I'm going to be seeing like the show floors, having like some meetings in the hotel rooms and stuff. I'm like actually participating in it, which I realized then and more so now, like that is more than someone a few years into their career, especially as a person of color, especially a designer, gets to do. Because when you have larger teams, who do you pay to go out to CES to be your representative? Likely not some of the general staff, someone higher up, which is less of a chance of being a person of color. So didn't know that at the time. I thought, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna see industrial designers, I'm gonna get to meet like a bunch of teams, it's gonna be great. And we even went to some of the meetups. We went across the show floors. The 4 days I was there, I ran into one Black industrial designer, and he wasn't from America, he was from Canada, but he did have his own business, so that was cool. And I remember being like actually heated. I know tech is vastly skewed in this one direction. It's like so small that it just anything that isn't straight, male, white, affluent is considered diverse just because of how skewed the world of tech is toward that. So it's not even like the ask when we're having these diversity discussions is Black centric or Hispanic centric. It's like just anyone else being introduced into this space would help the numbers actually.
Like it's a two-part story. I mean, it's probably like billion parts, but right, whatever. It's easy to divide things into two, right? You know, right? And so, you know, like it's a two-part story. Like one part of the story is really around, okay, someone needs to take the skills that I've acquired and apply those to my community, because a lot of people who have these skills aren't taking the initiative to apply them to my community. But then the other path is that like, because that still keeps things, to me, it's like it builds a bit of the separate but equal model. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you keep your resources in your community, we'll keep our resources in ours. But at the end of the day, it's like, if I'm better at making potatoes and you're better at making cheese, like economics tells us it's better that we trade, right? And so I think that like what also needs to happen is like you need both. You need that person who's going to be like, I just want to build Black products for Black problems. And you also need the person who's like, you know what? I'm just going to like be who I am as a Black person, show up in this other space and make it so that it's easier for other people of color to walk in the door behind me, right? And I think that it's best when you take the path that's most authentic to your personal self-expression, because then it's you, but even more importantly, it's sustainable. You know what I'm saying? Because you can do a lot more doing 2 push-ups a day for all of your life than you do doing 100 push-ups once and never doing them again, right? And so if the work that you're doing isn't sustainable to you, like isn't a part of who you are, how you feel, you can't maintain it enough to make a difference. And, you know, like I tell people all the time, I was like, look, you know, like I'm like, making money is easy. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, somebody made this shirt, they got paid. Someone made the thread that went into the shirt, they got paid. Someone shipped the shirt to me, got paid. Someone made the store that the shirt got shipped to, they got paid. Someone made the bus that I took to get the shirt, they got paid. Like, you know, someone drove the bus, they got paid, right? Easy to make money, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, but finding something that you love to do long enough until it makes money is hard. And I feel like with social impact, it's even harder, you know? So like, and I feel like lots of activists burn out, like lots of, you know, because you're like fighting the system and it's just trudging through molasses, you know what I'm saying? Through the desert. And it's like to me, the work that I do isn't work. I'm just living my life, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it's also work too, because it's so authentic and it's so a part of like who I naturally am. And my natural thing is that I just want to see everyone do better. I don't care, you know, like, and the worse off you are, the better off I want to see you do, because then you have another story that defies the odds, that shows someone else that it was possible. And to me, like, that's the legacy. Like, you know, like I'm walking down this co-founder path, but a huge part of it is only because like this story really needs a great ending so that people want to read it.
This may seem like a divergence, but this is all going to wrap together. I wanted to cover when the first time growing up in the American culture for both of us, you felt or remember grappling with being a minority or othered. And I think this is an experience that happens multiple times throughout a person of color's life. And there's different phases to that realization of where you stand in your community or society. So I wanted to hear the first time that you remember like really grappling with that.
Yeah, I was probably like 11 or 12. And I remember I was walking, because Camden used to be divided. It's a really small city, about 89,000 residents, about 9 square miles. And it's divided to the north, the south, and the east section. In a part of South Camden, which is where I'm from, there was another section that was a bit souther than that. And it was an area called Fairview. Now in Camden, we called it White Boy Fairview, because all the white people who lived in Camden basically lived in this part of town. And you had to cross over a little bridge, and there was like Black Boy Fairview and White Boy Fairview, and the bridge was the two things that separated them. And I remember one day I was just walking through, I was just exploring the city. I don't know what I was doing up that way. But I decided to like, oh, I've never been over this bridge before. Let me walk over here. And I remember like walking over, and about 2 blocks in, like police officers roll up on me, and they like kind of like buzz, hey, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, I'm just taking a walk. And they were like, yeah, you're not allowed here. And then they put me in the car and drove me back to the bridge and let me get out and say, you have to stay on that side. And so I think that was like the first real time. I didn't really understand at the time. I was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not, you consider police as an authority. So if they say, hey, you can't do this, you just assume that, hey, there's something I don't know, and I'm not allowed to be
probably did
here.
something wrong.
Exactly. So I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for like looking out for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, but like looking back at it now, so at the time it didn't feel othered. It felt like I just didn't have all the information that I needed. But now looking back at it, like, I think that was probably like one of the first moments.
So mine was a little more muddy. It was different tiers of education that I saw as, quote, my way out. Was every tier that I went to, I realized, oh, this is where I stand. In the Bronx versus Westchester in New York State, that was going into high school. And going to Parsons, that was New York City versus the world. And like, who gets to succeed and have well-off students that can go to a design mecca that is known world around. Yeah. And each tier was me understanding again, like, that the things I thought were the result of, let's say, hard work and a meritocracy, yes, I did work hard, were the result of generations of people in my family working hard, but also being lucky. Like, things happening as easily as they did for me were not at all guaranteed.
Yeah.
And as much as I would like to thank my own hard work, a lot of that was just the benefit of the situation I was born into.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm in the same boat. It's like, it's like my 5 best friends growing up. I think I was the only one who went to college. Pretty sure I was the only one. Everyone else went to the military. Because it's like, if you can't play basketball, you can't rap. That's how you get out. You either go to college, which wasn't on a lot of people's radars, or you went to the military because the minute you were 18, you can get shipped somewhere. One guy, like really good friend of my cousin's, he like got out, he went to the military, like that was success. And hey, you're out, like you're in the military. He came home for leave and he got killed because someone thought he was somebody else. Like my little cousin got shot like 9 times in the chest 2 months after his 18th birthday. Like my niece, like my cousin was driving up the street in a van and shootout breaks out and stray bullet goes through her van and hits her, at the time, 2-year-old daughter in the neck. She's still alive, thank God. But she's had like lifelong disabilities that she has to deal with because of that. And it was just, life is like kind of really frail, and you get that like really, really early on, like kind of growing up in that space. And for me, I'm kind of like, like I was smart enough to know that like I didn't belong here, but I was also smart enough to know that like if I was too smart, I wouldn't make it out, because then you become a target.
I think it's that if we want to get any closer to solving the pervasive issues that we have, we need to involve more voices. Right
now it's disproportionately harder, exponentially harder in some cases for some people over others. And I think that's the part that we need to shift.
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Keith, for being so generous with your time. We've definitely gone over, but Andrew's going to cut it down to be nice and concise.
Nice.
So before we sign off, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. So you can find us at www.wear.works, WORKS. You can find us on Instagram at wear.works as well, on Twitter at wearworks Inc., and on Facebook at Haptic Technology. So that's kind of where you can take a look at all our work. And we have some exciting things coming up, including like a launch and some pilots that we're getting ready for. So if you happen to know people who are blind or visually impaired, or happen to work for a blind or visually impaired organization, give me a holla. Let's have a conversation.
And we'll definitely forward any messages that incorrectly come to us. All right. So yeah, you can find out more about content that Tomorrow Labs is creating on our YouTube channel. We're also on Instagram at Tomorrow Lab NYC, and obviously our website, tomorrow-lab.com, for people who are looking to work with us and create cool things. I think that's a lot, and there's so much more that needs to be said and worked on, but I'm glad we were able to sit down and chat.
Yeah, this was fantastic, man. Thank you so much for that time and the opportunity.